Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition, of course, here on the 440 Sports Network, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We do have a little college football for you today because, again, it's the Super Bowl and the draft is still months away. Free agency is still a long ways off, so we'll talk a little bit about the preseason top 25 in the SEC to sort of wrap some things up. Mike Vrabel, of course, not getting a job, although he technically might have a job. What does that mean? I'm getting a lot of commentary from
he's taking the Butch Jones route. He's got to go through the rehabilitation clinic that is college football.
My father, for those that don't know, I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My father was born in Madison, Wisconsin. My grandfather was born in Madison, Wisconsin. And my father is a diehard Wisconsin Badger fan. I told him this is one of the best things that's ever happened to the program because Wisconsin doesn't get this kind of stuff. They don't get former NFL head coaches hanging out and on State Street, eating brats and drinking beer. So it's a great opportunity. We'll get to what that means. Of course, the Super Bowl is here. We'll discuss the Super Bowl in general because it's going to be fun. Of course, a rematch of the 2020 Super Bowl. But I think ultimately I'm more interested in what the Titans fans can learn from both franchises, what they've done well. What does it mean for this team going forward? But also, I think it's a large conversation about the 49ers way, which, of course, has yet to get over the hump. Kyle Shanahan, as the Atlanta Falcons offensive coordinator, couldn't get over the hump. As the head coach has had multiple chances, couldn't get over the hump. So we'll have a conversation about all of that. And, of course, a new quarterbacks coach for your Tennessee Titans as well. So lots of stuff to get to today on the show. Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group. Make sure you support good local businesses. Sinkers Beverages right here in East Nashville. Their sister store, Bluegrass, up in Hendersonville. They've been serving the market for 50 years in Bluegrass. I think 45 years, for Sinkers Beverages. So make sure you support them, of course. And if you're going to buy booze for a Super Bowl, which I can't imagine anyone is still doing dry whatever for the Super Bowl. Like no one is doing dry whatever for the Super Bowl. So you need booze.
Well, yeah, because it's not dry January anymore.
Yeah, but everybody nobody.
It's only different book.
People under the age of 40 aren't drinking at all. It's just ridiculous. You need to drink for the Super Bowl. Is that am I being a bad influence?
No, but also, the Super Bowl. Do you really want to get a major hangover because of this Super Bowl? We'll see.
I am finding it, and we'll get to this. I am finding it difficult to pick a side because I hate one and I've seen the other one too many times.
There's only one side to choose for Titans fans, but
okay. All right, we'll get to that. And so I think a lot of fun stuff to do today. BuildKG.com, of course, the Kingston Group. If you want to get involved that way, if you have any questions about your house, anything about remodeling, custom builds, buying, selling, doesn't matter. Make sure you talk to the Kingston Group. Nose to tail operation, in-house design team. They do everything in the building, everything on their team. They're not outsourcing bits and parts of the project so that, halfway through one bathroom remodel, there's like a fucking shower head hanging and it doesn't get finished and there's no tile. Like, no, they do everything from start to finish and they let you know what's going on. So buildkg.com. A lot of you guys in the comments, so good to see you. Thanks for being here. If you want to click subscribe on 440 Sports YouTube page, that'd be great. If you want to share it on Twitter, that'd be great as well. If you want to get some more folks involved, we wouldn't hate that. So we do appreciate it. Okay, the most important update, Team Ramrod. Have the dogs kissed again, Zach? Where are we at? Oh, we're waiting.
They have not. They have not.
Bated breath. Okay, so let's
Several people are finding out via my tweet of this show today that Jason Isbell's getting a divorce, and I've rocked some worlds on Twitter.
Is that so? You posted it in your tweet? I'm devastated.
I said, Jason Isbell's getting a divorce, but Braden and I are still together. Come talk Titans with us.
That's excellent because I told you that this was happening like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
I'm devastated. Yeah. I'm devastated that country music's Nashville's outlaw independent country music's first couple is now separated. What is their little daughter Mercy going to do? My daughters know her name.
You know way too much about this family.
My daughters know their name. Knows the little girl's name. I've sang that song "Something to Love" to my daughters when I sing them to go to sleep. So it's a big deal in our household. My wife and
Jason Isbell plays like a whole 4-day at the Ryman, right?
8.
And and my friend Chris, who's a big fan of the show, him and his wife go to every one. I haven't checked our Slack for our fantasy football league to see how he's handling this because his dog's also having ACL surgery on top of this. So it's a real emotional roller coaster probably for Chris right now.
I imagine. PBK is right. We're going to start with Bo Hardegree and Peyton Manning's super coaching staff that Brian Callahan is assembling. But if you look behind me, of course, you see Jason Isbell hat show prints, which I'm not allowed to have a lot of hat show prints in the house. but we're very much a huge Isbell family, so we're a little shook up about this. That is for sure. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if we can get through it. We'll see if we can make it through the weekend. But going to so he did 8 nights the last 3 years, I think, at the Ryman. I did 3 nights one time where I went to 3 concerts. Like I went on a weekend and then like a Wednesday and then a weekend. So I tried to space them out. And I was like, I'm a huge super fan. And I was like, that's too many. That's too many nights. 3 is too many nights. I go to 2. Now I go to 2. 1 in the first weekend, 1 in the second weekend. My daughter wants to go and my wife wants to go. So that's what we do. So anyway, RIP, the Isbell family. I mean, they're still alive, but
they're alive.
The family's not.
My God.
Sorry. So what are we going to learn from the Super Bowl? We're going to get to that. What are we going to learn about the 49er way? Talk a little Super Bowl as well, because I don't know who to root for, although I kind of do. And then some top 25 stuff in college football. And we'll get to your questions. Forrest already saying, should I get my Bowers jersey in navy or white? Ordering right now. We'll get to that in a second as well. I love how you guys started F words this week, by the way, talking about that. Stackingtheinbox.com also. Make sure you check that out. Bo Hardegree. What do we know about him? What do fans need to know about him? How do we feel about the Titans as the Titans coaching staff continues to be assembled, sort of like a la the Marvel universe?
It was pretty obvious that this was going to happen. I thought Hardegree could be an offensive coordinator candidate, but most likely the quarterback coach. David Shaw I kind of floated his name, kept it kind of healthy out there too. Listen, David Shaw could still find a way on the staff as an assistant head coach or something, because it's obvious that he wants to get back into the NFL. He's not coaching anywhere else. I like Bo Hardegree. He did a really good job with the 4th round pick, who is infinitely less talented than Will Levis. And I would say that even though he had Devontae Adams, they did a really good job protecting the football with Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell had a way better completion percentage from weeks 9 through week 18 when Bo Hardegree and Aiden O'Connell kind of became tied at the hip definitively. And 66.1% completion percentage versus 58.8. So that is a pretty big jump, 8 points in completion percentage. He also had the better expected points added during that time, so better EPA per play. They put Aiden O'Connell in. He was clearly ready. Obviously, he's not like I would say he's very Tyrod Taylor-esque in the sense that maybe Jacoby Brissett. That I don't think he's going to be a high-end starter. I don't think he'll be Kirk Cousins even, but he's like at the bottom of that 60% that we talked about. 20% elite, 60% good enough, and then 20% garbage. I think that he's like at the bottom of that 60%, hovering somewhere long term. Maybe he does turn into some weird Tom Brady success story, but I'm not gonna put my money on it. And he may not even be the starter next year, so who knows? But for what he was, a 4th round pick, weird offense in transition, switching away from Josh McDaniels a little bit, trying to install your own little offense, even though they're similar. The offense that Hardegree really kind of knows is very similar to the McDaniels offense anyway. But going from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator and still being able to maintain a certain level of progression and to get better than what you were, because they were averaging 15.9 points per game leading into week 9, and then from week 9 on they bumped it up to, I think it was 22.9, maybe it was 23.9, I can't really remember which, but it was at the top end of the spectrum on there. So to me, I'm looking at him like, this is an upgrade over Charles London on paper. I also assume, because of how competitive Will Levis is, especially even in ping pong or table tennis versus Trevor Lawrence, that he will mesh well with Bo Hardegree. I wouldn't see why he wouldn't. And I think that this is a upgrade, and I think it's an upgrade across the board from Charles London to Bo Hardegree, even though I really like Charles London. But I said, you can always upgrade.
I don't honestly know if it's a huge upgrade, but I don't think it's a downgrade. And I think that's maybe the most important thing that Titans fans should take away. O'Connell was a 4th round pick. D good. He was the 135th.
I googled it before. I googled.
Yeah,
before
I'm on your back.
Stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm defending your honor in the comment section here, as one want to do on a Thursday afternoon. this is similar to me to the conversation we had on Monday about the offensive coordinator, and that is, all of this still depends on Brian Callahan being a really great play caller and offense design leader like that.
Yeah,
It
it
still all
does and it
depends on
doesn't,
him.
right?
So
Like it does and it doesn't for this particular position because I mean there's only so much time Brian Callahan's gonna be able to spend with Will Levis. He is the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. There's much more to it. So Will Levis's development isn't as tied to Brian Callahan, but Will Levis's success is, if that makes sense. Because like the way I look at it is that his development, the little things, the mechanics, the little upticks in accuracy, reading defenses, calling plays at the line, recognize that falls under the quarterback coach. Like that kind of stuff. Your time is spent with the quarterback coach. Unless Brian Callahan's going to ignore 75% of his duties and only focus on Will Levis, and maybe he does. I don't know.
well, it's more, I guess.
But everybody in the National Football League that has talked about the importance of your quarterback coach says that your young quarterback spends the most time in the offseason, at practices, in the film room with the quarterback coach. So to me, the development of Will Levis is different than the success of Will Levis, right? You can still win games with Will Levis, maybe if he's like 58.6% completion percentage. I mean, the Titans still did. But if he's 66.1%, some of that may be scheme, but a lot of that's going to be his mechanics, his progression from year 1 to year 2.
Ultimately, I guess maybe I need to rephrase it. Ultimately, I don't think if I'm Brian Callahan, again, there's a balance here, and I'm learning this about Kalen DeBoer, for example, at Alabama, that he's very good about picking out the things he doesn't know, asking questions of people who do know about those things, and then gaining that wisdom in that exchange. That's some anecdotes that I've heard about Kalen DeBoer behind the scenes at Alabama. So I don't want to say that I don't want Brian Callahan to be so rigid and so structured in what he believes that he never learns anything from anybody else. That's not what you want. But what I guess I mean is that I hope that because this is his area of expertise, that I hope that he wouldn't be hiring anybody that doesn't already believe in how the thing should be done according to Brian Callahan, if that makes sense. So if he believes in a 3-step drop and this technique here, or this, I think fundamentally there has to be alignment with the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator, and the play caller and the head coach. In
I'm
this
just
case,
saying that the quarterback coach is going to still be the one to carry that message out. It's not going to be Brian Callahan carrying that message out. Bo Hardegree is going to have to design the plan, design the regimen, design how practices are going to structure, what they're going to focus on under Brian Callahan's parameters. But Bo Hardegree is ultimately the guy responsible for, besides Will Levis himself, the development of Will Levis.
Sure, agreed. As long as it's following Brian Callahan's vision, that's all.
Well, I don't think any quarterback coach has ever gone rogue, and maybe I'm missing one.
But right, but again, that's why
Charles London did his tenants. Okay, so if we go back to Charles London, I think this is a good example. Charles London spoke at an NFL convention over the summer, and he had all these large tenets of how he thinks a successful offense or successful passing game goes, right? The Tennessee Titans used none of that. So obviously he was teaching and training Will Levis under the parameters of Mike Vrabel, even though he should have probably been teaching Will Levis and gone rogue because his tenets of the passing game were 10 times better than what Mike Vrabel, future concession stand worker for the Wisconsin Badgers, what he knows about football.
Well, I think ultimately, again, I think if they had hired Aaron Glenn, I would be so much more concerned, worried, focused on Bo Hardegree. I would. But to me, and just to your point about how I don't think Aiden O'Connell was a late 4th-round pick. Again, I think 135, I think was the pick. So he's this is not a guy with elite talent. He threw the ball around a ton at Purdue, and I thought was played way above his expectation and talent level. And that is in part due to what Hardegree accomplished. So I think you can put a check mark in his box as to recency. What did he accomplish? Good, check mark. And I think Brian has earned sort of the one thing I do sort of not question about Brian Callahan is sort of institutional knowledge of the NFL and people's backgrounds and their abilities, because he's just, when you're a lifer like he is, that's the one thing you should be able to bring to the equation, is sort of a deep understanding of how everything works and who all these people are. So again, because he has a background with a father on the coaching staff, I just am not, it's hard to get, like, I think Charles London was so much more important for the Titans because it was Mike Vrabel's head coaching job than Hardegree is to this team. And so as long as they're all aligned with how they develop Will Levis, that's all I care about. And ultimately I put the onus on Brian Callahan if it all fails. Like, I'm not
right,
you know what
right.
I mean?
If it all fails, I mean, it's like I just think that if you can't put him in the same bucket as Nick Holtz, right? Because we are us on the outside, and that includes the local media, are not going to know if Nick Holtz is successful or unsuccessful unless he is, gets Me Too'd or vandalizes the property or something like that. Like, we're not going to know if he's a trouble part. But Bo Hardegree, you have a definitive way to look at how, because I mean, like, offensive coordinator, he's not calling the plays. He's just being the puppet.
He's like an assistant. Yeah.
Yeah. He's being the puppet of Brian Callahan. But if Will Levis is struggling to grasp the intricacies of the offense, fix what he needed to fix from last year to this year, that falls a little bit on the quarterback coach, and that falls a little bit on Will Levis. I'm just saying, like, yes, the onus is on Brian Callahan, but you can actually find tangible evidence and proof of Bo Hardegree's effect on Will Levis. And that's what matters.
Okay. And ultimately,
it's like Brian Callahan's effect on the offensive line, Tyke Tolbert's effect on the wide receivers. You can see the effect that position coaches have, even if they're carrying out the plan of the head coach or the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, depending on how your setup is.
That's totally fair. I think, all right, well, we'll see. Again, the staff almost fully assembled. We'll see if there's some other guys that have been held over or not. And we'll see. Okay. So
looking Justin Otten is,
yeah, it looks like it
is going to be held over. They've declined other teams to interview him for the same position. And then, Chris Harris may stick around, which I think is a good deal for all parties involved. He didn't get a defensive coordinator for the third cycle in a row. Don't know what's going on with that.
The Eric Bieniemy of defensive coaches.
It's kind of what it feels like. But I think he's likely to stay. And I think the other one was Lori Locust, who was mentioned. There may be someone else that's mentioned that didn't really matter in the big scheme of things, if I can't remember who it was.
Yeah. So we shall see. So ultimately, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group are great sponsors. Make sure you support them. We do appreciate their support, and you guys make sure you support them if you're in Hendersonville. Bluegrass Beverages, proud sponsor of Football and Other F Words. Excellent episode this week. You and Herndon discussing a lot of draft stuff, and we'll get to to Vrabel and some top 25 stuff here in a minute. But support those two companies, Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. Just remember those names, of course. Ultimately, the Super Bowl, to me, I'm curious. We can get to like sort of the game itself a little bit later, but like I'm just curious if you think that there are lessons to be learned. And I think, you guys started F Words talking a lot about Brock Bowers, because Brock Bowers is clickbait this week, and honestly, I think he is absolutely a piece that the Titans.
It was just like, to me, it's just like, it's a big whoop that he said it.
Yeah, I don't.
But it did spark an interesting conversation that most radio shows ignored, and that is everything else around. What if they did take the tight end? Why is he's so important? So we kind of went into a different direction other than, well, what does this mean for Tennessee Titans? Are they going to fucking draft him? Well, who the fuck knows right now? Like, who?
Yeah.
Like, at this point, nobody knows who's drafting who.
But I do think, and I'm going to tie this into Brock Bowers and the week that was, and your conversation with Herndon, which I think was the smarter conversation about Brock Bowers, which is he above the line or below the line with a player the Titans should take at 7? I think that's the ultimate question: is who is above that line of you stick at 7 and you take that player because that player makes you better automatically, is a blue chip prospect, and those are the pieces that they need the most. And I think ultimately the question about Brock Bowers is there's a line there. And is he above that line or is he below that line in the Titans' eyes? I think, I agree with you and Mike that I think he is the last name that I would take at 7, but he's on the list for sure. And I think that ties directly into the lesson from the Super Bowl, which is that the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill was a weapon for them, no doubt. Patrick Mahomes is special. We get all this stuff. Andy Reid is brilliant, all this stuff. But the piece that makes it all go all these years can be a tight end. And the reason I say that is because one of the lessons from the Chiefs is they've invested in Travis Kelce over and over and over again, and they immediately took
49ers and George Kittle
right
across the way.
Exactly, a versatile and dynamic tight end. Now Kittle's a much better blocker than Brock Bowers,
right? And Travis Kelce
and Kelce. I think Bowers far more like Kelce.
Bowers is kind of in the middle of both those guys, which there could be, in as far as skill sets concerned, which that's a good place to be in.
But think about, to your point about Kittle, actually, and I hadn't thought about this. I was thinking that one of the lessons I think Titans fans should take from the Super Bowl, and then moving forward, looking ahead to the draft, is that you can build an offense around a quarterback tight end relationship, because Travis Kelce and George Kittle are the examples. And honestly, if you look at the Niners, the Chiefs is more obvious because it's, hey, we have to choose. And we let Tyreek Hill go because we didn't want to spend $120 million on a guy who punches his pregnant girlfriend. We would prefer Travis Kelce, who dates the most popular person on the planet. Obviously, that's in the script. But yes. Kittle was the first piece. He was there before Brandon Ayuk. He was there before Christian McCaffrey. He was there before Deebo Samuel. He was the original sort of versatile weapon that they had. And then they started putting pieces around him. Some of that's just timing, but he was the original piece that Kyle Shanahan built around, to be honest.
And I understand everybody's concern with that is that, well, do you really do a first round pick on that guy? But I think people kind of forget that back in 2021, people were like, go ahead and draft Brock Bowers now. Brock Bowers was clearly going to be starting from freshman year on. Brock Bowers was clearly going to be a first round top 10 pick. No matter what year he would have gone. I still believe that if he would have came out as a freshman, if he would have came out in 2022, if he would have came out and he's coming out last year, it wouldn't have mattered. He would have been a first round pick. And that's just how good he was, how good he's been. I'm, again, not advocating for it, but at the end of the day, if it goes 3 quarterbacks, then, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Joe Alt after that, I don't know. I think I'm taking Brock Bowers over Rome Odunze, and you can call me fucking crazy, but I am not really liking Rome Odunze's separation that he gets in college versus what he'll get in the NFL again.
I don't think that's crazy, but I think those are the two names that I have, I'm in my mind debating. To me, it's to your point, and not to get back into a draft conversation, but if it's Joe Alt, Marvin Harrison Jr., or Malik Neighbors, you don't need to debate it. You need to have the order. You need to have the order, and you need to know how you evaluate them. But if one of those 3 is there, you take one of those 3 and you don't ask questions. If Odunze and Bowers are the 2 names that, even for me, I sort of have on the line. If it's anybody behind them, and again, you have to assume some quarterbacks get drafted in this group. If it's anybody behind them, then I am doing everything in my power to move down a couple of slots to try to draft a quality receiver or offensive lineman, because I don't think the gap between who you would take at 7 and who you'd take at 11 is different than the 3rd round pick you pick up. That's ultimately where I fall on that. So, but again, that's the lesson from the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And the lesson of the Super Bowl that kind of I have 2 lessons that still tie into the draft, but it also ties into roster building, because Chad Brinker says the lifeblood of your roster comes from drafting, which we all know. And like I said on Football and Other F Words, vampire Mike Kafka has swooped down in the middle of the night for the past 3 years to drain the life force of this blood, because he's a vampire. I'm sure he brought his horde, his nest of vampires.
So John Robinson made bad draft picks because Mike Kafka drained the blood out of John Robinson. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I'm just using a vampire metaphor, lifeblood. So, and he's the only vampire I know that's alive walking this earth.
Interesting.
So, but if you look at the starting 22 of both teams, not including kicker and punter and special teams, starting 22, 63.6% for Kansas City and 68.2% for San Francisco were drafted by that team. Over half of the players on their team, both over 60%, one of them close to 70% with San Francisco, were drafted. Now that goes down when you go into the 53, right? Like if you go to the 53, it's still over 50% for both teams, but it's 50.9 and 52.8. So that's over half for both that are still there from when they were drafted. Okay, so they never left the team. They stayed on the team. They found a way to keep them, or they drafted really young. Look at the Kansas City Chiefs and their defensive backs, really, really young. That matters. And to me, the lesson is that they don't have to be first rounders. Okay, so 14, right, of 22 for the Kansas City Chiefs were drafted. 3 are first rounders. And 15 of 22, 3 are first rounders for the San Francisco 49ers. So there's not that many starting 22 that are first rounders. The bulk of their roster is made up from second to seventh rounders. I mean, first rounders are kind of hit or miss. Right now, in the starting 53, the San Francisco 49ers only have 4 first rounders, and the Kansas City Chiefs only have 5 first rounders. I mean,
I'm trying to think of
not a lot of first rounders.
I'm trying to think of who outside of Mahomes was a first round. Like Rashee Rice wasn't a first round pick. Chris Jones was a second round pick.
Hey, I'll tell you. You ready?
Oh, don't do it to me.
Okay,
it's
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Oh God,
Trent McDuffie.
McDuffie. What I found interesting about the starting, to your point about being drafted, I think it's ultimately something we all know, but I agree with you. To me, it's that the stars on the team outside of McCaffrey, really, like Patrick Mahomes draft pick, Travis Kelce draft pick, Chris Jones draft pick, Trey Smith draft pick. Like to your point, they're not first rounders, all of them. But they are
McCaffrey, you traded draft picks for Christian McCaffrey, so he does not count. I'm talking about players that they drafted.
No, right, and that's what I'm saying. He does. I said outside of Christian McCaffrey, the best players. I guess you have to include Trent Williams in there because they didn't draft him either. But ultimately, thinking about Kansas City, like the best 5 or 6 players on the team were draft picks. Only Mahomes is the first rounder, whereas with San Francisco, it's a little bit more scattershot, to be honest, right? Like Ayuk's a first round pick. I mean, Debo was not a first round pick. Trent Williams they acquired in the draft or in a trade or free agency, and then McCaffrey via trade as well. But Purdy is one of the most important players on the team, and of course we know where he was drafted. So it does. And you look at I know Fuanga's not playing the safety for San Francisco, but that's a perfect example of drafting a superstar potentially at a position and then developing him. Now I know he's injured on this run for the Niners, but he's a great weapon and piece on that team. Look at their linebacking core. I mean, it's ridiculous. So you have to build through the draft. I think that's another good one. What is the Trent Williams thing I find interesting, though, because I think that ties into the draft. Are we at a place like I agree with your basic point that Bill Callahan can do a lot of work with an offensive line. He instantaneously is going to make average players solid players good, and good players great, etc. And I think, to be honest, I think there's enough pieces on this roster from an athletic standpoint that one of these guys is probably going to end up being better than we think because Bill Callahan is going to get his hands on him. But the one thing that makes the Niners different is Trent Williams. Like that offense is loaded with elite weapons. It's loaded with pieces, and we know the scheme is great and all the pre-snap, everything, all the buzzwords, pre-snap motion, et cetera, et cetera. But Trent Williams sort of makes it go. And when he's not on the field, it changes. Does that change how you view Joe Alt, for example? Or is there any lesson to be learned there?
Joe Alt in the Tennessee Titans mind, or Joe from the Titans perspective? No. And here's why. Because this was going to be my next thing, was talking about the draft capital that was used on both offensive lines. San Francisco was tied for the 5th least amount of sacks allowed with 18. And the Kansas City Chiefs are tied for 7th with the least amount of sacks allowed with 19. How many first rounders are on both teams starting on the offensive line?
One.
And that's Trent Williams. Yeah. Then it goes 2nd round, UDFA, 4th round, 5th round for the 49ers. And so from left to right for the Chiefs, it's 2nd, 3rd, or 7th, depending on if Joe Thuney's playing, and I don't think he is. 3rd or 7th, 2nd, 6th, 2nd.
And so there's a lot of second round picks.
Yeah, but none of them have Bill Callahan. That's the point. You have a first round pick you have a second round pick, and then you have whatever free agency is. The second round pick would be Dylan Radins, by the way. But you got to see what free agency holds, because some of these guys were acquired in free agency, like you said. So in my mind, I want all. I am telling you guys, the Tennessee Titans do not view it that way. They have flashed it neon lights until they come out and say something totally wildly different than what they have told us on radio for like 3 or 4 days when they've been on there or on podcasts or whatever. Until they tell us something different, I am working under the assumption that Joe Alt is not as high on their big board as some of the wide receivers, maybe even Brock Bowers. I'll even allow for the possibility of that, even though I don't think that's true. But I also don't think you need it. I just don't. I don't think you have. Here's where I'm at. The Titans don't have to fucking do anything. There you go. There's your analysis that you can carry with you for the entirety of the offseason. The Titans don't have to do whatever the fuck you want them to do. They don't have to draft an LT. They don't have to draft a wide receiver. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that. They need everything. They need they need so many players that they need everything. And you don't know how the first 6 picks are going to fall out at this point in time. So we don't know what's available. It's all fruitless conversation until we get closer to the draft. So I just maintain they don't have to do everything because they need to do everything. If that makes they have to do anything, they need to do everything.
And you need to be prepared for anything. I mean, that's the nature of the draft. I also think it's must-fly season from now until when you're on the clock. And anything that they may or may not be hinting at or alluding to could be complete smokescreen. Now, you can't. I don't know.
I would highly doubt that they like planned ahead, and Brian Callahan decided, I'm just going to, just by chance, repeat what I've already said with the Cincinnati Bengals in prior podcasts and stuff. Let's just be honest. I get your smokescreen. There is no smoke screen with this.
No, I mean, yes. Would you prefer to have
fire right now? Someone call the fire department and put this fire out.
Would you prefer to have Jamar Chase on with 36 seconds to go? Yeah, of course you would. But you also need to have a quarterback standing upright for all the other 52 plays of the game as well. So I listen, I know what you're alluding to, and I think that you're right to sort of read that between the lines if you want to. I also don't think it means anything.
There is no reading between the lines. Like, what is this conversation that
what
we're
I'm
having?
saying is that none of it means...
They've told you with their mouth.
None of it means
there is no reading
anything.
Between the lines. Read on the lines.
None of it means anything about their big board, is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't mean anything to me. They could still think Joe Alt is by far the best player in the entire draft, and they could still be saying the same things. And it doesn't mean they take him, though. It doesn't mean they take him. It means that, or if he's not available, to your point, you got to be prepared for anything to happen. I did hear like a lot of second rounders in there. I do like that. And to be honest, you've got not only Radins as a second round pick, you got MPF as a third round pick, MPF with a ton of athletic pedigree. Duncan, we know, is a great athlete as well, although farther down the draft. But I do think that there is something in there for Callahan to work with. And I do think you throw them all into the competition and see which one becomes the best. And if you get one guy,
if need a competition. Like I kind of feel like Bill Callahan's like Aaron Glenn, right? Aaron Glenn said, you put me in a room for 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you if this guy can do it or not. He's going to sit down with these offensive linemen. He's going to be able to tell you, okay, here's how you need to build the roster because this is what I need because there ain't a guy on this roster.
No, maybe that's what he says. I just think that a guy of his coaching ability and these 3 players with great athletic ability, at least one of them will become serviceable. Mm-hmm. Probably not great, but like serviceable. And to me, that's a numbers game. And if I'm in that coaching staff room or whatever, and like you don't have the ability to get your hands on a player and develop them right now and actually do this kind of stuff with pads on in practice, I've got to assume that one of them can rise to the top. Now, I do think that, to your point, like the Titans don't have to do anything. Nobody, and you're not a good general manager if you are pigeonholing yourself into doing something in the draft before the draft starts. But what you have to be prepared for is anything, and I think that's where Bowers comes in, or a trade back comes in, or if you love a Dunze, that comes in. I don't think there is an elite defensive lineman in this class. I don't think there is an elite cornerback in this class, like guys that we've seen in the past. I think there are some positions where there is a void. And I think that is why it actually sets up perfectly for the Titans to take best available player and have that best available player also meet a significant need. And I think that is where, as long as that's the approach,
the odds are that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I also, me and Stoney kind of agree. We may agree differently on which players there is. I don't think there's a lot of blue chip prospects in this draft compared to last year. And I think that's a real issue when you're picking at 7. So I personally don't think that any of the quarterbacks are blue chip prospects. Now, they're going to have to be drafted because you have to draft a quarterback and you have to have a team. But to me, I look at it and I go, I don't think Roma Dunze is a blue chipper. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously is, but I'm not too sure that Malik Neighbors is. But like,
I'm close
5.
on him. I'm close
like
on
I'm
him.
at 5, and when you got 5 blue chippers and you're picking at 7, that's really teetering the line right there. You know what I'm saying? So like,
yes, and the good news is that if those quarterbacks aren't blue chippers, but they go ahead of you, brilliant,
yeah,
great.
Hopefully,
I would.
The other teams recognize that these quarterbacks. See, don't we do this every year? Everybody's like, "Oh, all these quarterbacks are going to go in the top, picks and all this stuff," and there'll be like 6 quarterbacks taken in this round. There'll be 7 quarterbacks taken in this round, and then it ends up being like not that good because they're not that good. I think that I personally like Jaden Daniels. I'm not sure if Caleb Williams, and Drake May technically go 1 and 2. Right.
Ed says, "What if Daniels is there at 7 and they take him? Floored, shocked, mild surprise." I'd fall over dead.
Floored and shocked, not the same thing. You could shock me through 3 floors, I guess.
Yeah, both. I would be completely shocked at a 172-pound quarterback. Look, I think Jaden Daniels' talent is awesome, but he's 40 pounds lighter than Lamar Jackson, so I have concerns about that. And he also had elite weapons at every. We can get to Jaden Daniels. We got 4 months to break down Jaden Daniels. It's the week of the Super Bowl. But I do think
we're not going to break down Jaden Daniels because we don't need a quarterback. So
no,
I didn't fucking pay attention to the quarterbacks at Senior Bowl. We're not going to fucking pay attention to the quarterbacks in depth on this show.
And I would agree with you that he is not a blue chipper, and I would agree with you that there are not many of them in this draft. I do think that Caleb Williams and Drake May are blue chippers. I think Joe Alt is. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is, and I think Brock Bowers is. Getting back to our original point. And to your point about like how good he's been from an evaluation standpoint, like Will Anderson was viewed as like the best pass rusher in college football for multiple seasons. It wasn't just like oh, look at this guy. This is why I was so floored by Jacksonville taking Trayvon Walker. It's like, no, Aiden Hutchinson was the best player in the Big Ten for 3 years, and you guys fucking overthought it. So Brock Bowers.
No, the NFL wrote the script and turned it in and said, okay, we're going to put Aiden Hutchinson with the Detroit Lions. That's what happened.
That's true. I forgot about that. The deep state made sure Aiden Hutchinson played for Detroit. Yep. I forgot about that. It's all the deep state fault. But again, like there are guys, very rare of them. There's not many of them. There are guys that are just clearly better than everybody else for the entirety of their college careers. Almost the second they step on the field. And Brock Bowers has been the best athlete on almost every football field he's ever been on. And that includes ones with Will Anderson on it.
Yeah.
Like literally on the same field with Will Anderson. And so I think Bowers is absolutely in that group. I think Neighbors
and he's been in that group since a freshman.
Bingo.
That's the key.
That's my point about like the Aiden Hutchinson, Will Anderson thing. You can overthink it. Like guys are just elite players. Like
and over 50% of his snaps were in the slot. He's not even an inline tight end, which again, you just need players. You just need players.
He's an athlete who makes plays, and it's never been anything else other than that. He's never not been that guy, and he would be that guy for the Titans. Yes, you could talk about health because he plays a physical position, takes a lot of shots, but that's the game of football. Titan Up Tony says, is Olu a blue chipper, pretty dominant in pass blocking? I would say he's not. But that doesn't mean taking him at 7 is a bad idea. He still could be there. It still could be their top tackle available if Alt is not there. And they may even have him higher than Alt. I don't agree with that, but I don't get paid millions of dollars to work for Rand Carthon. So Dunze and Neighbors I'm torn. I like Neighbors much better than a Dunze, but I don't know if those guys are blue chips. But like, again, you can move back to 12 or 13 and get Brian Thomas. Like you can move back 12 or 13 and find a tackle. So anyway, now we're off subject. Let's get – I want to ask you about the 49er way because that's clearly what Rand Carthon is trying to build here. And Shanahan has had – I guess ultimately I think one of the messages I want to deliver to people is I think if Kyle Shanahan and the Niners lose this game, there's going to be this like cheap, lazy social media conversation about like, does this sort of taint the legacy of the Kyle Shanahan system, right? Like the way that the 49er way, that, like, for lack of a better term, that they've gone about doing this. And I think that is sort of lazy to say because it has clearly been extremely successful, that they've gotten to multiple Super Bowls, that yes, I know when he was the coordinator for the Falcons that it didn't work in that game, and it might have been his fault that they lost to the Patriots, and might have been the defense's fault as well. And Tom Brady has something to do with it, just like Patrick Mahomes has something to do with the Chiefs' win this weekend. If they were to win the Super Bowl, you have to sometimes just say the other guy is great. But I think there's going to be a cheap narrative if the Niners lose again, that people are going to try to take shots at the way Kyle Shanahan has built the organization, run the organization, and that it somehow is not good enough. But I don't think that's right. I think that's the wrong way to look at it.
Well, I think Tighten Up Tony hit the nail on the head, because this is exactly what I was going to say when you sent this to me in a text. This is exactly how I feel, and that is Shanahan, the new Andy Reid, can't win the big one. So I'd give everybody in San Francisco and Santa Clara the cautionary tale that if you guys move on from Kyle Shanahan because he's not winning you the Super Bowl every year and only one team can win it, he will go somewhere else and win the Super Bowl. He is the next Andy Reid, because that, and maybe he stays with San Francisco the whole time and we see it play out. Like if Andy Reid has stayed with Philadelphia, he never wins the big one. But I think that the narrative is likely to be, if they lose, is going to be a little bit about Kyle Shanahan, a lot about Patrick Mahomes, and a lot about the other guy, Brock Purdy, that they're still just a quarterback away.
Yep. I mean, now I think it's fair to say that about Garoppolo. If Purdy
I like Purdy, by the way, but
I do too.
Conversation.
No, I agree, and I think the conversation could be like, here's the thing. Ultimately, Patrick Mahomes might. This is where two things can be true at the same time that feel contradictory. Kansas City is going to win the Super Bowl because of its elite quarterback, not because, I mean, honestly, the defense is the best Mahomes has ever had. But if they win the Super Bowl, it's because of Mahomes, which is certainly not what we expect Will Levis to be, nor is it fair to expect Will Levis to be that. So you can have that conversation, be like, no, to win the Super Bowl, you have to have one of these guys that is rarefied air, special, etc. And by and large, most Super Bowl champions do have that guy playing quarterback most of the time. Once every 12 years, there's a Trent Dilfer or a Brad Johnson or a Nick Foles. It doesn't happen very often, though. And so that is something you can learn from this if Brock Purdy doesn't get it done. But it also is not necessarily, you don't destroy the Shanahan 49er way because Brock Purdy wasn't as good as Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's like no one's as good as Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. I think two things can be true.
The defense for Kansas City is so good that I do think that Kansas City is going to win this game. I think San Francisco is the better team, but I think that the edge that Patrick Mahomes gives you combined with that defense trumps what the entire makeup of the San Francisco 49ers is, because that's how good Patrick Mahomes is.
Yep.
And if they were to win and Andy Reid does not retire, then to me, I feel like they should be favorites again. And I don't want to hear people start worrying in week 8 or week 9 that, oh, the Kansas City Chiefs look like they've really taken a step back. Because guess what? You've done it now 3 years in a row. Did nobody learn from Tom Brady? We all did it every year for the longest time. Well, this will be the year that Tom Brady isn't any good, and blah blah blah. Then he turns around, he has like 4,500 yards and 50 touchdowns and a Super Bowl ring. Like, at some point, you just have to recognize that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are just playing on another level than almost any quarterback head coach combination in the league.
Brian Moore, by the way, really good question. I want to get to your question in just a second, but I agree. And I think we said it on this show, like around week 12, around week 14, like maybe week 16. It's like, guys, like, and I think Tighten Up Tony says this, it's the best roster versus the best quarterback. That's been the same story every game of the playoffs for Mahomes. Like and I'm maybe even not the Dolphins game, but like Bills were the better team, Mahomes is the better quarterback. Ravens were the better team, Mahomes is the better quarterback. Like, this is the way the Niners are the better team.
Also the better head coach. Don't discount Andy Reid. It's the combo. It's the combo that they have. And also Eric Bieniemy is back in the building doing install. And I told people that they would be stupid not to bring Eric Bieniemy for this playoff run. Well, why would you do that? Blah blah blah. Because he's really good at telling the players on the Kansas City what to do, what to recognize, and how to do it. And sure enough, he did it right before the Ravens game, and I'm sure he's doing it all week this week. Hidden gem, Eric Bieniemy. I don't know why anybody doesn't give this guy a chance. At all.
And the way, honestly, they didn't beat Baltimore because of Bieniemy in the offense. They beat Baltimore because Steve Spagnuolo and the defense. The defense was elite in that game, and Baltimore and Lamar Jackson played one of its worst games on offense. But again, I tried to tell everybody, do not pick. I will not pick against Patrick Mahomes until he is officially dead. You can't pick against him. You can't pick against him. And so
like
I am also picking the Chiefs because you can't pick against Mahomes until he's dead. You can't do it. I will not pick against him until his team is eliminated from the postseason. Quickly here, let's go back to a question that Brian's asking here. Do you have more confidence that the Titans will draft a top tackle and he'll reach his potential, or a top receiver and he'll reach his potential? There's one, if you want to go history, which doesn't apply to Bill Callahan, Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, or anybody else running things right now. History tells you that this organization is elite at developing offensive linemen and atrocious at developing receivers. Again, that has nothing to do with people making decisions today.
No, but to his point, I think that the top tackle, I think we both agree, is Joe Alt. So for purposes of this conversation, let's compare Joe Alt to Marvin Harrison Jr. Or should we do Joe Alt versus Malik Neighbors then?
Let's do that because that's more likely.
7.
Yeah.
I am more confident that Tyke Tolbert can get more out of Malik Neighbors than almost a lot of other wide receiver coaches the Tennessee Titans could have hired. I think Joe Alt, I don't think that Bill Callahan necessarily raises the ceiling of Joe Alt, because Joe Alt's ceiling right now is all pro. Bill Callahan doesn't change that for me. I mean, I think that even Jason Hoteling couldn't fuck up Joe Alt at this point. So for me,
it's not go crazy.
I don't think he could. But for me, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, Tyke Tolbert has a proven track record that he develops rookie wide receivers very quickly. So I think that in this scenario, in this coaching staff, I think Malik Neighbors reaches a better career potential quicker here than maybe a first-year offensive lineman that already has that. Like, I kind of feel like, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm really explaining it properly, but I think that the higher ceiling is easier to achieve because of coaching and development with Malik Neighbors, whereas Joe Alt already is kind of built in.
Yeah. No, I got you. I also think you can add another layer to this, which is that I think it is easier to see, find, evaluate, and select an elite receiver than it is a franchise left tackle. I think it's actually easier now to find, because I think the evaluation of the player is a little bit more accurate on a receiver than it is a tackle. There's so many more variables with the offensive line that make it harder to predict that ceiling. But I agree with your basic analysis of the situation. And frankly, I think the coaching is even, but yeah, I mean, maybe Alt's already maximized a bit, which is also a big part of the evaluation process. It goes to recruiting and it goes to the draft.
Well, it's not necessarily that I think he's maximized. It's just that I already see, I see all pro in Joe Alt. I see, if you get the development right, Pro Bowl with, I don't think that's why I think that's the difference between blue chip prospects is that I think that if you put him out there, he's a day one starter, impact player. Joe Alt, you're good to go. Like, he's a day one ready-made football player. With Malik Neighbors, you're going to have a lot of development to his game.
That's fair.
To make him a little bit more effective. So that's kind of where my differentiation lies.
Okay, I like that. Are we? So we're both on the Chiefs. Looks like Stoney is on the Niners. We shall see here. Quickly, one of the questions I keep getting asked by everybody, and these are like diehard Titans fans who are good, smart football people, and I keep getting the same question from everybody in my universe, which is like, is it a big deal? Does it mean something more to you that Mike Vrabel didn't get a job this cycle as a head coach in the NFL? And I don't think it does. I don't think it changes the evaluation of the situation of what Amy Adams Strunk and Rand Carthon decided to do. Had he gotten the job somewhere, I don't think it changes the evaluation of what they decided to do. If he doesn't get a job, I don't think it changes the evaluation. I think there's a timing element to this. There's a fit element to this. There's all kinds of things. There's a cooling down period that people need, and I still think he's pretty well regarded in national circles by experts that know football. I still think he's a pretty good football coach. I don't know. Like I don't think it tells me a whole lot about. I think the move to young offensive mind is like a full part of the NFL right now. And
except for the 5 defensive head coaches got hired.
Well, I just mean, okay. One of them. Are you counting? You're not counting Harbaugh, right?
No, it's there's 5 of them got hired. Raheem Morris, Mike Vrabel, because I kind of John Harbaugh. He's one of the 3. Antonio Pierce, Dan Quinn, Raheem Morris, Mike McDonald. All right, well, you know what?
Dave Canellis, Brian Callahan, Jim Harbaugh are 3 offensive guys. And then I was talking about the last few years, but yes, I agree with your point.
Right.
Mike McDonald kind of fits into that mold.
Mayo, that's the one I was thinking of. Gerard Mayo. I knew there was 5.
Yeah. So ultimately, I mean, to be honest with you, you can't, like, the Patriots are sort of a separate entity because they had already had it in his contract. So like that one, again, this is what I'm saying. It's situational, right?
Contract.
Sure, but it's situational. That's who they wanted. They pushed Belichick out. They made the divorce happen, and it was Mayo's job. So like that's why
they chose Mayo over Mike Vrabel. They didn't even give Mike Vrabel a shot.
They didn't give anybody a shot. So again, that's my point.
Yeah, but I mean, specifically, you have to point out the fact that all anybody did for like the last 8 weeks of the season. I mean, we could be honest about Mike Vrabel. I don't understand why this is so hard for some people to be honest about Mike Vrabel in this situation. In that the last 8 weeks of the season, all anybody said was like, "Oh, if the Titans fired him, or if he's going to get traded, he's immediately going to go to the Patriots, and Kraft's going to get rid of Gerard Mayo, and blah 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 blah." And they put out the stuff about Gerard Mayo not jiving with the players, and guess what? They chose Gerard Mayo.
Well,
they could have got out of the contract if they wanted to make Mike Vrabel. They could have done anything. It's not just Bedard. It was other people.
No. What I'm saying is that Mayo. I'm agreeing with you, and then saying that like Gerard Mayo was the guy. Like the Greg Bedard piece, the entire point of the piece, which had that little snippet about Rand Carthon in there, and that got Titans fans all worked up. The entire point of the piece was that 5 separate front office sources said that Gerard Mayo was going to be the next head coach of the New England Patriots. That was the headline of the story and the main body of the piece. And You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I'm not using just Bedard. Everybody was talking about
it. Right. There's tons of
not because of Bedard's piece. So we just got to be honest with the situation. They chose Gerard Mayo over Mike Vrabel.
I agree, but they chose Gerard Mayo over everyone and didn't even consider anyone else. So again, I think that's not a Mike Vrabel thing. I think that's a Gerard Mayo thing. So you could be wrong about this, dude. You can be wrong. You can be wrong. It's okay.
Yeah.
They chose Gerard Mayo for a long time. They chose Gerard Mayo.
Mike Vrabel, who doesn't have a fucking job, and we all said that he would, and he doesn't, right?
Right. Yes, I can't argue the facts here. Jim Harbaugh was always Jim Harbaugh was this is where it's complicated. Jim Harbaugh was clearly and always the guy for the Chargers. It was never going to be Vrabel. If you want to look at a few jobs and say, "Oh, that's one where I think it was maybe he should have been more in line for that job, or they should have had more interest in him." I think it is wrong to hire Dan Quinn over Mike Vrabel. I think that's stupid. I think that's a bad decision. I don't think you're going to hire Arthur Smith's former boss. So I don't think that works. So, like, again, there's some situational stuff. It's bad timing. I think Mike Vrabel will be back in the NFL coaching. It is what it is.
I think it may be 2025 before he's back in the NFL head coaching. And because I don't think we went through the list, and there's not a lot of teams that are going to pivot from their current coach to a Mike Vrabel type coach in one way or the other. And it may take another cycle for him to go through because obviously, the NFL does not like really that old Patriot way and the hard-nosed defensive head coaches. Some of them are offensive head coaches, hard-nosed, control everything kind of guys. And that's what he is. Size aside, the important part of the Rossini piece is about him not fitting with the people across the way. But with the general manager, they don't fit with what he does not fit what the general managers right now currently want. He does not fit what ownerships currently want. I find it ironic, but it's hilarious but we have seen, we know why he does not have a job. It's not just timing. Timing can be some of it that can be explained for some of the other excuses for some of these teams. It's because of who he is. It's because of his coaching. It's because of how the last 2 years went. It's because of what the end result was in the infighting and backstabbing and ego and wanting this and wanting that. It's going to be part of it. It's going to be because of his piss poor staff that he probably brought to the table in the 1 or 2 interviews. Mike Vrabel was not as good as we all thought among the NFL league circles, that we fed into and we ate and drank from the fountain of the national media, who did not know as much as what is going on behind league doors, closed doors in league circles. I think that's an honest assessment to make.
I think we'll know in time. If he gets another job and does a good job, then that's just wrong. If he doesn't get another job and the NFL has evolved beyond him, then we'll find out, and we'll just see that was, he never evolved and he should have changed.
I'm not wrong in the sense of what I just said, because we all said, and the media told us, we would all be stupid for firing Mike Vrabel because he would get a job. And they all knew, by saying this, when we all said this, we all knew the majority of the openings that were going to be open. We all knew it. So this includes me and saying that, because I said that. People on X and all that.
Me too. Yeah.
We were all wrong. We were all wrong. And the league told us we were wrong.
Yes. Well, but yes, factually, that is completely true. I also don't think it means that those were all the right decisions by those front offices, and only time will tell us if that is the right decision or not.
It's not about the results on there, but it's about how the league felt about Mike Vrabel in 2024. They did not feel as strongly as we did, as the local media, the rest of the local media did, and as the national media thought. They did not feel as strongly, these guys that we knew were going to be open, they did not feel as strongly about Mike Vrabel as we all thought.
Yes, I mean, factually, that's true. I think there are I think it's not as simple as that, but I think, coaches get fired and then they do the rehab, and then they sort of the temperatures get ratcheted down, and then all of a sudden they're back coaching again. Like it's not a new story in the NFL that a guy, well, some of them don't. I mean, Andy Reid got fired and was very good. So
but he got immediately hired. So, he didn't take a year off.
I don't even remember the timeline, to be honest with you. So I'll take your word for it. But
he got fired, then got hired.
My ultimate point is that I don't think you can just say and I don't think this is about Vrabel. I think it's about anybody. Like, this is what I had to tell Nebraska people when they hired Matt Rule after a failure as a head coach in the NFL. It's like, well, if he had gone to another NFL team, nobody would have touched him. Nobody would have wanted him. But it doesn't mean he's not a good potential coach. And Nebraska needs what he's bringing to their organization. College is a very different game, different skill set. I get all of that. But sometimes you just need to kind of be away from things and let temperatures come down before you come back. And hopefully you evolve as an individual. But I don't think it takes away. I think, to your point, yes, if I had said on this show, which I did many times, by the way, I'm not denying that, hey, I think Mike Vrabel is going to be a coach. I think Mike Vrabel is going to be a coach immediately. Factually, that's incorrect. That doesn't mean that he's not a good coach, though. Like, is what I'm saying. If nobody ever hires him again,
he'll have to find the right situation. I mean,
right. And if no one ever hires him again ever, then that means that Mike Vrabel was unable to evolve, to adapt, to learn, to grow, to mature, whatever it is you want to say, that the league evolved beyond him and his game. And then that's a fact at that point. But we won't know that for another couple of years. So that's all I'm saying.
And that's true. We won't know that for a couple of years, but we also know that he's going to have to find the right situation. He's going to have to find someone that's a malarkey situation, right? Someone that's gotten the team to a certain point, and now
Dallas
they can't get over. They don't feel like they can get over the hump. He would go backwards with the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy, he doesn't have an offense that he can run that's going to keep up with what Mike McCarthy wants to do. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the defense looks like without Dan Quinn and was it Joe Hewitt, I believe is his last name. And I think I'm maybe Joe. I don't know, shit or something. I think it may actually be Joe Schmidt or something like that. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see. Listen, Dallas Cowboys didn't even want to interview Mike Vrabel for the defensive coordinator position. So that should tell you that he's probably not on the radar for head coach.
If he wanted the job, I don't have any idea.
Allegedly. Allegedly, that is what's being reported in Dallas, is that he wanted the job, and they decided. I think it actually is like Schmidt or Schwitt or something like that, but they didn't even want to interview him.
Sweaty balls.
That's
Well,
what's
again,
going on in Dallas.
my favorite team was coached by Mike McCarthy for a long, long time. I would take Mike Vrabel over Mike McCarthy in 2 seconds. That's just my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's what I would do. But that's also, ironically, that's also because Mike McCarthy refused to evolve and adapt, and we moved on as an organization. So, okay, no more time here for the college football rankings, but we got all season for that because college football doesn't start till August, so we got plenty of time for that. College football preseason top 25 videos, though, are on the website. So 440 Sports, if you want to see all the SEC teams and where they're ranked, please go check them out, of course, over there on 440 Sports. Give us a like, a share, a subscribe, share the product. You can follow us on Twitter, of course. Make sure you support Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, 2 great companies as well. If you need booze for your Super Bowl party, make sure you go to Sinkers. Am I even allowed to say that? I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Did I just violate some kind of law? I'm not allowed to say your big game party.
I have no clue.
Go to Sinkers to stock up on your big game party, to make sure your big game is got lots of booze. Make sure you go to Sinkers Beverages.
I am lost on what would be against the law in that phrase.
You can't in a paid advertisement. You cannot put that phrase in there. So I'm making sure the
Super Bowl. You can't say Super Bowl.
I don't think you can. I don't think you can. It's really stupid. Like, have you ever noticed that on TV? Anywhere on TV or radio, it's always the big game or internet graphic design. If it is selling that event and a product that's selling something for that event, it always says the big game. It's not allowed to say, you're not allowed to say Super Bowl, which is ridiculous. So
that's crazy.
Super Bowl. Go to Sinkers, everybody. Kingston Group, Build KG as well. Stacking the Inbox, football and other F words. Otherwise, that's it. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, the big one. For Zach, I am Braden. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.